It wasn't a drug overdose, a plane crash, or even creative burnout. What nearly destroyed Pink Floyd was a contract. In 1985, Roger Waters of the band's driving force walked away. But instead of ending Pink Floyd, his exit triggered a brutal war over the band's name, the money, and the legacy. Millions were at stake. Lawyers were called. And the whole thing would end, not in a courtroom, but on a houseboat. This is the untold story of how a single contract turned friendship into betrayal, art into litigation, and nearly killed one of rock's most iconic bands. The tensions began years earlier. In 1983, the final cut was released, a Pink Floyd album in name, but barely a band effort at all. For the first time since 1971, David Gilmour received 0 songwriting credits. Waters dominated everything, later describing it bluntly as my solo project with guest musicians. The band that once created magic together now barely functioned as a unit. Behind the scenes, their record label was worried. Pink Floyd still owed them another album under contract, and millions in advances hung in the balance. That obligation would soon become a ticking time bomb. While Waters publicly declared the band a spent force creatively, Gilmour seethed in private. Studio sessions became battlegrounds. Every song, every sound became a fight for control. Then, in December 1985, Roger Waters made his move. He announced he was leaving Pink Floyd, assuming the band would dissolve entirely. He was wrong. The record label stepped in, reminding everyone that the contract wasn't with Roger Waters. It was with Pink Floyd, the business entity. If no album appeared, it would be a breach of contract, and so Gilmour saw an opportunity. After years of being overshadowed, he could finally take back the band. With drummer Nick Mason's support, he made a shocking decision. Pink Floyd would continue, without Roger Waters. Soon after, they quietly invited keyboardist Richard Wright, who had been forced out during the Wall sessions, to rejoin as a session musician. The battle lines were drawn. Waters believed Pink Floyd couldn't exist without him. Gilmour was determined to prove him wrong. By October 1986, Waters had gone to war. He filed legal action in London's High Court to stop Gilmour and Mason from using the Pink Floyd name. His argument was simple. Pink Floyd's identity came from his concepts: Dark Side of the Moon, The Wall, his vision, his lyrics, his themes. Without him, he said, it wasn't Pink Floyd anymore, but Gilmour and Mason countered. They argued that Pink Floyd's sound, the soaring guitars, the distinctive drums, the atmosphere, was the result of collaboration. No single man owned it. The Pink Floyd name, worth millions each year, was now a prize neither side could afford to lose. Legal fees skyrocketed. Both sides spent hundreds of thousands. And all the while, record executives grew impatient. Where was the album they'd paid for? Behind closed doors, Gilmour had already begun recording a momentary lapse of reason. He gambled everything on the hope that Waters wouldn't win in court. If he lost, the album would be worthless, and Pink Floyd would be finished forever. As 1987 arrived, both sides were exhausted, financially and emotionally. Years of friendship had turned into bitter silence. Something had to give, and so in December 1987, Gilmour extended an olive branch. He invited Waters to meet him face to face, not in an office, not in court, but on his floating studio, the Astoria, moored on the River Thames. There were no lawyers, no managers, just the 3 original members, Gilmour, Mason, and Waters. They argued. They revisited the past. They faced the reality, the legal bills, the record company pressure, the exhaustion. And finally, after hours of raw, personal conversation, they reached an agreement. Pink Floyd would live on under Gilmour and Mason. Waters would keep full rights to The Wall and his solo work. Royalties from past albums would be split according to the old deals. The war ended, not in a courtroom, but on a houseboat. That unconventional settlement became a legal precedent, cited for decades in band disputes around the world. But the story didn't end there. Critics doubted Gilmour's Pink Floyd could survive. A momentary lapse of reason was called Pink Floyd Light. Yet when the band took it on tour, everything changed. Their comeback was monumental. A massive circular screen, blinding lasers, hospital beds suspended from aircraft cables, Pink Floyd's shows became the most spectacular in rock history. "We bet everything on this tour," Gilmour admitted. And it worked. The Momentary Lapse tour grossed over $100 million, one of the highest totals of the decade. Fans didn't care about the lawsuits, they came for the music. Tickets sold out within hours. Pink Floyd was back. Nearly 2 decades later, the unthinkable happened. July 2, 2005, Live 8, Hyde Park, London. 150,000 in the crowd. Billions watching on TV, and then Roger Waters walked on stage beside David Gilmour. Nick Mason on drums. Richard Wright on keys. Pink Floyd, reunited after 24 years. For 22 minutes, they were whole again, performing Breathe, Money, Wish You Were Here, and comfortably numb with the same haunting perfection that had defined their golden years. The world saw joy, but behind the scenes things were tense. Separate dressing rooms, separate arrivals, minimal conversation. Still, during Wish You Were Here, cameras caught something remarkable. A fleeting glance between Waters and Wright, the same man Waters had once forced out. It was an expression of regret. When organizer Bob Geldof suggested a reunion tour, Gilmour refused. "I've done the biggest charity gig of all time," he said. "Please don't ask me to do it again." What the world saw as a reunion was, in truth, a farewell. Yet years later, Roger Waters admitted, "I was wrong. I was wrong to think Pink Floyd would just die when I left." By then, both sides had won and lost. Gilmour's Pink Floyd outsold Waters' solo career by far in the early years. His stadium tours made millions. But decades later, Waters' decision to keep the Wall rights paid off. His Wall Live tour from 2010 to 2013 earned over $458 million, proving his vision still resonated deeply. Gilmour's The Endless River in 2014 debuted at #1 in 21 countries, proof the name Pink Floyd still carried power. In the end, both men found success and peace on their own terms. "If I hadn't settled," Waters later said, "the financial cost would have destroyed me." The Pink Floyd case changed the music industry forever. It redefined what it means to own a band, its name, its sound, its soul, because in the end, no one truly owns a legacy like Pink Floyd's. Not the songwriter, not the name, not even the lawyers. Only the music endures. And that music, the heartbeat behind Dark Side of the Moon, the melancholy of Wish You Were Here, the defiance of The Wall, outlived every lawsuit, every feud, every contract. Pink Floyd became something larger than any of its members. It became a reflection of human struggle, ego, creativity, ambition, and the high price of success. In interviews years later, both Gilmour and Waters admitted what fans had long suspected. The conflict wasn't just about music or money. It was about control, pride, and identity. Each man believed he was Pink Floyd. Each one felt betrayed. And yet, both were right. Waters gave the band its philosophical edge, the biting lyrics, the political statements, the grand concepts. Gilmour gave it soul, the voice, the guitar tone that could make an arena fall silent. When those forces clashed, something beautiful shattered. After The Wall, the band had stopped communicating. They recorded separately. They mixed separately. Even their engineers had to splice together fragments recorded in different studios. It wasn't collaboration anymore. It was survival. So when Waters finally walked away, the breakup wasn't sudden. It was inevitable. But what came after was a battle over something deeper than ownership. It was about legacy. Who would carry the name? And who would be remembered as the true heart of Pink Floyd? And that's what makes the story so human. When Gilmour stood on stage in 1987, leading a band many called an imitation, he was carrying the weight of expectation and defiance. He wasn't just proving Waters wrong, he was proving to himself that the sound, the spirit, could still live on, and it did. A momentary lapse of reason and the division bell sold millions. Fans who had grown up with The Wall found new meaning in songs like Learning to Fly and High Hopes. The band evolved even as the shadow of its past lingered. Waters, meanwhile, carved out his own empire. His tours became theatrical masterworks, blending politics, history, and emotion into performances that felt more like art installations than concerts. When he brought The Wall back to life in the 2010s, millions filled stadiums around the world. Two different visions, two different paths, one enduring legacy. And then came 2008. Richard Wright, the quiet soul who had endured the band's wars with grace, passed away. His death marked the true end of Pink Floyd as the world had known it. In that moment, something shifted. The bitterness between Gilmour and Waters softened, not into friendship, but into understanding. Waters would later say, "We both lost something, but we both found a way to keep going." It was a rare moment of clarity, a recognition that their war had produced no true victor, only parallel legacies bound by shared genius and shared pain. Legal experts still cite the Pink Floyd case as a turning point in music law. It showed the world that a band isn't just a group of musicians. It's a brand, a business, and a creative organism that can outlive even its founders.